I'm sorry. I could have brought my big laser. It's like Desiree, I have some big lasers. Well, we're not going to talk about genetics and all that wonderful stuff that's happened. Superpowers, sorry, it's so popular now too. Very big and small. And I'm definitely not going to talk about time travel. I refuse to talk about time travel. It's impossible, and it's a cheat. As is illustrated, so we're not going to talk about time travel, as is illustrated in this slide right here. What do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? It's irrelevant. Okay. I think that was for the March for Science. So let's get started. Let's do some, start with transportation. Half of the problem in science fiction is just getting from point A to point B, especially when you're talking about space travel. But let's look at historical. Let's go all the way back to 1870. Jules Verne wrote about some of the earliest travels, and not all of it was through space. His 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was all about travel, but underwater rather than through the vacuum of space. And by the way, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, it's not about how deep they went, it's how far they went, because a league is about 3.5 miles. And so 20,000 of those, it's actually, you can't go 69,000 miles deep because the Earth's only 8,000 miles in diameter. So anyway, he had his enigmatic Captain Nemo accomplish his task in a submarine called the Nautilus. And though the experimental underwater craft have been around since like the 1600s, you didn't really get multi-person powered underwater craft until like the mid 1800s. And Jules Verne was around at that point. So he probably knew about underwater travel. And like most science fiction writers, of course, he just took things a few steps further. Here what we see is Disney's version of the Nautilus, which I think is just the most gorgeous submarine I think I've ever seen. It's a beautiful kind of steampunkish version of a submarine. Of course, we do have submarines. It anticipated the submarine. We do have nuclear-powered submarines here. These are powered with nuclear reactors that generate electricity that can turn the motors that propels the submarines. Even a little earlier than the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea book, he wrote about leaving the Earth in this book here, which From the Earth to the Moon. And he was amazingly, almost frighteningly prescient about how this was going to be accomplished. For instance, his astronauts traveled in a capsule. Amazing. Our astronauts travel in a capsule. Here you see the Apollo command and service modules. But there were some differences between the book and the way we do it. Verne's astronauts didn't get there on a rocket, propelled on a rocket. They were fired there from a cannon. Now, of course, that would normally turn the astronauts into jelly, but you know, it's science fiction. It's plausible, you know, you have to suspend disbelief. Another interesting point, where did he fire his cannon from? He knew the orbital mechanics. He knew that the further south you placed it, the better off you were, because you could take advantage of the rotation of the Earth. You add the rotation of the Earth to the velocity of the bullet. Where did he put his gun? In Florida. Where do we put our rocket? Where do we launch our rockets from? Florida, because it's far south. Pretty cool. In 1902, the book inspired a film, Voyage to the Moon, by Georges Méliès. This may be the earliest science fiction film. At least it's considered to be one of the earliest science fiction films. Maybe the first science fiction film. Let's watch it. By the way, you're going to see a lot of hat doffing. That was done a lot back then, I guess. And everybody wears hats.
La rampe de lancement est installée au-dessus des toits de la ville.
By the way, the special effects in this movie are amazing for 1902. Hats. By the way, you may notice here that in 1902, sex sells. And 3, 2, 1. And now a scene I'm sure you have all seen. It's a classic. Okay, they're good. Okay, we know there's no air on the moon, but we'll give them that. The movie, the Méliès, Georges Méliès anticipated something here. I want you to notice this. He anticipated this shot coming up here, the Earth rising over the horizon of the moon. By the way, this movie was, of course, inspired by Jules Verne, but this movie also, moving forward, inspired things like, well, these. Cheddar rocket crackers from Trader Joe's. But as I mentioned, this was the shot that really meant so much to a lot of people. It showed us for one of the first times that we live on that small blue marble, and really gave us a feel for the fact that everything we know, everything that's ever been, and everything that will be is going to occur on that blue marble. So let's move to a different movie. Let's move to 2001, which was made in 1968. I know that's kind of confusing. So when I say 2001, I don't mean the year, I mean the movie, okay? Unless I say so. This movie anticipated so many things that are now commonplace. When the film was shot, it was before the space shuttle was built. It was before space stations orbited the Earth. It was before we made it to the moon. Stanley Kubrick was meticulous about with his science and technology, and it's just an amazing thing to watch. And of course, Blue Danube, I mean, how can you possibly beat that? So here, Dr. Heywood Floyd is on a space shuttle. This was before the space shuttle, on his way to a space station and then to the moon. This satellite, I'm not too sure about. I mean, those solar panels are white. Solar panels have to be black just by definition. They're absorbing the sunlight, you know, it's okay. So there was a little mistake there. And there's a beautiful wheel in the sky. Thank you, Journey. That was slowly rotating to provide artificial gravity. And now we're going to see the space shuttle. I want you to notice real carefully who's running the space shuttle program. By the way, these are all practical models. This was before computer graphics. So all these are all models, giant models. There's the space shuttle. Do you notice who's running the space shuttle? Pan Am. Never made it to 2001. But look at it's very close to the actual space shuttle as we saw it. It's a little sleeker, nice. You know, it's a little swept back, but it's still pretty close. Now, he's got flat screen TV. That didn't exist. Notice the way his hands kind of floating. Astronauts, if you watch them sleeping, it's sort of like that. The pen is actually attached to a giant, spoiler, giant sheet of glass because they couldn't hang it. It wouldn't look natural. A little bit of making of here too, okay? So our flight attendant is about to come in. They wisely put her hair in a hat because in weightless conditions, it would be really hard to do. She has Velcro shoes to keep her stuck to the floor because it's all zero G. And of course, floating objects, dangerous. You can put an eye out with that pen. Remember, this was before computer graphics. I'll show you what the state-of-the-art computer graphics are. It's in this segment. watch astronauts sleeping. It's just like that. Now our shuttle has to dock with this spinning space station. Unfortunately, we never quite made it to that level of space station by 2001. Actually, we didn't make it to any level of space station by 2001. But remember, the turn of the century, the turn of the millennium was supposed to be a big thing. This right here is the state-of-the-art computer graphics in 1968. Seriously. These are all, slides. Those are slide projector kind of things. So the shuttle, which is going to show up very soon, is going to have to lock its rotation to the space station. But notice down at the bottom here, these guys down here are right side up. The guys up there are upside down. Now this is a zero-G hub, so them walking is, I think, a little questionable. And by the way, the guys over the side, they're also kind of sideways, so not bad. So now the shuttle's coming in, and it's going to lock its rotation to the space station so it can dock. This is going to be important because I have a segment coming up that's going to demonstrate this. So notice the shuttle is rotating synchronously. I like the fact that the entire station hasn't been built yet, too. It's really kind of cool. Yeah. Now you can see it's locked to the rotation. Now this is one of my favorite shots here, by the way. This model of the space station must have been gigantic because they flew a 70mm camera right through the space between. Stanley Kubrick, amazing cinematographer. Now they had to come down from the 0G section down to the 1G part of the rotating space station. And of course, you have to do that in a very comfortable elevator. And of course, since they're starting at 0G, that does require you to wear seatbelts in the elevator.
Right. See you on the way back.
Now, this movie has inspired countless homages. And one of my favorite homages is this one from The Simpsons. It was a episode called Deep Space Homer. So science fiction also influences popular culture. It goes in both directions. We'll see this in a moment, but I want you to note that there's 3 astronauts on this shuttle, and the one that's over furthest to the right here is voiced by an actual astronaut, Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. Listen carefully to what his comments are. I think this has got to be the funniest thing I've ever seen.
It's beautiful. It's the most awe-inspiring sight I have ever seen. Giver of life, mother of us all. Hey guys, look what I smuggled aboard.
Homer, no!
Huh? They'll clog the instruments!
Careful, they're ruffled.
I'll take care of this.
Tell me if you recognize what the homage is to 2001 here.
You fool. Now we may never know if ants can be trained to sort tiny screws in space.
So we eventually did make a real space shuttle, and this one is STS-125, which was the last servicing mission to the Hubble Space Telescope. And I was lucky enough to actually, I watched this one launch, not from this position. This is a little too close for people. I watched from 3 miles away. But if you ever get a chance to go to Cape Kennedy, Kennedy Space Center, it's actually Cape Canaveral, and see a launch of anything, it's amazing to watch. Feel yourself vibrated when
Liftoff
that thing
of
takes off.
Space
It's
Shuttle
just-
Atlantis. Final visit to enhance the vision of Hubble into the deepest
It brings
grandeur of our
tears to your
universe.
eyes.
Bypassed across the board, Scooter,
using
no action.
the shuttle many, many times, we actually did make it to a space station. And our space station, well, not quite as elegant as 2001, but still an amazing accomplishment to build this thing in space, in orbit around the Earth. It's really quite an amazing thing to do. And of course, it's been expanded since these were taken up. And they're still working on it. So let's get back to 2001. By the way, no artificial gravity there. 0G all the time. Let's move back to 2001. This is the Discovery 1. It's on its way to Jupiter here. You have to keep astronauts physically fit. In 0G, they deteriorate. And so several of the crew in here were kept in suspended animation. You can see them over there. And our astronaut here is keeping fit by jogging around the spinning part of this spacecraft. Of course, how do they do this? In the studio, this is a giant Ferris wheel mounted vertically. So the cameraman was hanging upside down there for a while. So not a comfortable movie to make. The music in 2001 was also amazing. So there's the crew, the 3 crew members still in suspended animation. Work consoles. Now his buddy, there's two astronauts who are awake. See the 2 beds there with no bodies in them. His buddy's going to come here. He has to enter through the hub, the 0G portion. So Hal, that's Hal's eye, is keeping track of things. We'll talk about Hal in a moment. So he's going to, notice he's sitting down here eating. But he's climbing down the other direction, which means that guy was hanging. Making of the movie thing. So food there in 2001 was, well, we don't quite get to this, but you kind of an automat kind of thing, select and get. But the food was particularly unappetizing, just like real astronaut food is too. Anyway, let's move forward a little bit. What else has science fiction promised us that we have not seen? Well, flying cars for one, like in the Jetsons. Where's my flying car? Well, we'll see. It is being worked on. I like this sound. I have a Chevy Volt. I wanted to make that sound. Okay. Here's one of the first electric flying cars to be attempted. This was by a company called Moeller International, and they actually did achieve flight, but they achieved flight, but unfortunately not commercial success. I just looked, and their website hasn't been updated since 2017, so I'm going to assume that not much has happened. And there have been many other ventures in flying cars since. Actually, I could do an entire hour on flying cars. There's enough of that. But let's just look at a couple recent news clips. Here are a couple current examples of flying cars. One is in Seoul, South Korea, and the other one's in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Both are being proposed for autonomous taxi service. Personally, I'm really not looking forward to this. Right now, we kill more than 38,000 people every year in the United States alone on a two-dimensional surface. Can you imagine taking this to 3 dimensions? Well, you don't have to imagine because, of course, science fiction has already imagined it for us. For instance, here we are in The Fifth Element. If you have a wreck up there, not only do you take out yourself and the person you hit, you take out everybody on the way down and anybody on the ground. So I'm not sure that flying cars are a good idea. Anyway, so flying cars, great. What's another thing that we've been promised from science fiction? We've been promised rocket belts. And actually, rocket belts anticipated, were in science fiction, were in reality before they made it into science fiction. Lost in Space, the original television series, not the new one, in 1968, did feature a rocket pack. This is real. This was a rocket pack that was manufactured by Bell Aerosystems. And it could fly for about 45 seconds, as long as the person who was flying it was light. This is really, it's like the car outside here. You'll try to keep the weight down, you can fly longer. So that actually existed in 1968. Amazing. Okay, that's fake. You don't put your actors at risk. That's probably some Air Force jock. But this actually has been carried on. The rocket pack has not been given up on. Here's a modern version from Jetpack Aviation. This looks like fun. Dangerous fun, but fun. Notice they always test them over water because, if it fails, you'd much rather be over water, and hopefully there's a quick escape so it doesn't take you down with it. So rocket belts, great stuff. What other things have we seen in science fiction? Well, another example of flying technology that practically never happened. Practically.
Greetings, Captain.
We have Spock visiting Kirk,
Spock,
who is climbing El Capitan.
what are you doing in this neck of the woods?
I have been monitoring your progress.
I'm flattered.
How did
1,200
Spock fly
points of
up
interest
there?
in Yosemite, and you picked me.
I regret to inform you that the record for free climbing El Capitan is in no danger of being broken.
I'm not trying to break any records.
There they are,
I'm doing
rocket
this because I enjoy
boots.
it. Not to mention the most important reason for
By the
climbing
way,
a mountain.
this was actually shot in
And
Yosemite.
that
He's
is-
not actually climbing El Cap, but
Because
it
it's
was
there.
actually shot in Yosemite. This fellow really wanted a pair of rocket boots, and he was almost successful, except for the fact that he strapped actual jet engines to those boots. It turned out to be very difficult to control. He's tethered there, but still very difficult to control. But he also has rockets on his arms too, so kind of rocket boyish. You have to be in really good shape for that because you have to be able to lift yourself with your arms. And this concept has been carried forward as well. He had some success. This was also improved, but like I said, you need a lot of upper body strength to do this. Real Iron Man suit. Gravity. I guess that's the name of that company. I don't want to give up on the rocket boots too quickly here because there is something that exists that you can actually try if you can find it. This is a set of water-powered, albeit tethered, set of rocket boots that looks like a lot of fun, doesn't it? I'll bet this takes a lot of skill and strength to do as well. And I apologize if you're not a fan of death metal music. That's what came with the video. That looks kind of fun. Okay, enough of the music. What other things have we seen? Marty McFly, another flying thing. The Mattel hoverboard. Watch, he's going to kick. He's on a hoverboard. He's going to kick off of the air. I don't know how that works. And aside from the really terrible overacting. By the way, that was the first computer compositing that was ever done, right there in that scene. Okay, I think we get the idea. Hoverboard. Oh, flying car. What about a real hoverboard? Well, very familiar. Like our rocket boots we just saw, that's also made in a version of a hoverboard. So, not bad. This one looks more like, I think I could straddle it. I think I could do that. Much better music, too. What about real hoverboards? How about this one here? This is using like drone-like technology. This is a battery-powered drone-like, there's a bunch of little propellers all around him on a platform. He was trying to demonstrate controlled flight where you stand up on it. And of course, they fly over water as well because batteries don't last forever. But that also looks like a ball. So there it is, Marty McFly's hoverboard. I don't have it here, but recently someone took something similar to this and flew across the English Channel recently. That's an amazing feat. By the way, you're going to see here why you fly over water. Because eventually you run out of batteries. There you go. This is actually closer to what we're talking about with real hoverboards. This is an engineering class in France, and they built a magnetically levitated hoverboard. Inside that hoverboard, there's a superconductor, which has to be chilled with liquid nitrogen. But once the superconductor is chilled, it rejects magnetic fields. Now you'll notice the track it's running on is a bunch of very powerful neodymium magnets. And so it'll float above the track. Will it hold the weight of a person? We're going to find proud engineering students. Yay, go engineering. But guess what? The professor gets to try first, of course. He's not a small guy either. He's a tall guy. Does that look like fun? Well, this concept is what's used for magnetically levitated vehicles, like this train in Japan. This is a concept train. But it's like that hoverboard, but kind of built to commercial size. And it's magnetically levitated. It's maglev. This actually works. This goes very, very fast, as you can see. It's traveling 500 kilometers per hour, about over 300 miles an hour. I'd be a lot more excited than these guys. I don't know about you. Yeah! So get a concept of how fast this is. Actually, it's kind of hard to see here because they're kind of far away. But this is actually floating on a magnetic field. Okay, you're going to get a better feel for it down here at street level. It's pretty fast. So what about this levitation? Science fiction has provided us with some other examples of levitation. Star Trek. I'm going to go into a lot of Star Trek now. Starfleet Academy. I'm a cadet. Where is it? There, I'm a cadet. In more ways than one. Star Trek promised us stuff like this carrying device, but it didn't use magnetic levitation. It was anti-gravity. Unfortunately, science fiction succeeded. Science has failed us in this thing. We do not have anti-gravity or artificial gravity or anti-gravity, either of them, except where you have a spinning space station where we actually can create something that simulates gravity. However, science has not totally failed us. You can suspend objects using sound. Light objects here, you're going to see, oh, by the way, notice the music. These are little styrofoam beads, and they're being suspended on sound waves. And you can actually move them around. You can control where the nodes and antinodes of the waves are. You can even float heavier objects like, well, an electrical resistor or an LED. Or a little surface mount component. Piece of wood, a match, a screw, that's impressive, a piece of metal, or a nut, or water. I'm sorry, I'm anticipating. Water, there it is. You can actually build these. If you go online, you can find out how to build these things, and they're not like super expensive to build. You can build them for a few $100. Okay, so we have sort of anti-gravity. It's not really anti-gravity. I think one of the last things we can talk about transportation comes from Star Trek, and that's the transporter. I hesitate bringing in the transporter because, well, with the transporter, you didn't have to take a shuttle, although Dr. McCoy did. You don't have to take a shuttle from the Enterprise down to the surface of the planet. You just use the transporter. And how did that work? It takes you apart, molecule by molecule, turns your molecules into energy, beams the energy down to the planet, somehow turns your energy back into molecules down there and rearranges you and reconstructs you down on the planet. No problem. Well, I have a problem with it. My problem is that aside from the tremendous energies involved, I mean, something that's as the mass of a person is many, many, many times what you get out of an atomic bomb's energy. The transporter has to essentially kill you to create what is really a copy of you down on the planet. And then, so really there's a little bit of moral ambiguities going on there. Why couldn't they just read the position of all my molecules and create a copy of me on the planet? Oh, I think we just finished our 3D object there, so we'll get to that. Of course, when they were done with that, the copy of me, they'd have to kill it. So there's a lot of ambiguities with the transformer. So it looked like this, of course. Everybody has seen Star Trek.
They do that all the time?
Yeah. Looks simple enough, doesn't it? There actually is a way we can have telepresence, though. We don't have to actually create a new human being. You can have your own, well, we've been doing it for 1.5 years, haven't we? Except not quite like this. This is a thing from a company called Double Robotics that's just down the peninsula. And they have created this robot that has basically an iPad on it. And except you can control where the iPad is. You can roll it around. So think about this. If you were a kid who was at home who was sick, you could still go to class. Or in a rural area where they don't have enough teachers, a teacher could teach a class and roll around using and tutor individual students. I mean, it's not exactly like being there. I mean, you can't climb stairs, and I guess pressing the elevator button would be a bit of a problem too. You need some help, but cool kind of thing. So let's get into computing. We're getting awfully close to computing, so let's move into computing. Here we have evidence that computing may go back much further than we thought. You notice there's even like USB ports on the side there. Actually, this is an ancient Greek grave marker from 110 BCE. So, it's in the collection of the J. Paul Getty Museum down in Malibu. This probably depicts actually the deceased with a jewelry box or a wax tablet. So I just like it just looks so wonderful. Let's go back to 2001, where we can see HAL, which stands for Heuristically Programmed Algorithmic Computer. Except people think that the HAL is one letter less than IBM, maybe. And this controlled all the operations on board Discovery 1. It was also necessary because the crew was in suspended animation for most of the time on the trip to Jupiter. Now, Hal can speak for himself.
The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
Doesn't quite describe the computers of today because I don't know how many times you reboot, but it's getting better though. Computing the proposed computing in 2001, as of 1968, chess was a game that was not really possible on computers. There was no computer chess that could beat a human. Here we see our crewman there trying to play chess with Hal. However, 28 years after 2001 was made, on February 10th, 1996, IBM's Deep Blue computer finally was the first computerized chess game to beat a reigning world champion, Garry Kasparov.
Rook to King 1.
I'm sorry, Frank. I think you missed it. Queen to Bishop 3. Bishop takes Queen. Knight takes Bishop. Mate.
Yeah, looks like you're right. I resign.
Thank you for a very enjoyable game.
Yeah, thank you.
No point getting emotional in front of a computer, I guess. Nowadays, it kind of comes with the computer. This came with my computer, and I can even play it like Frank Poole was there. I can play it with my voice. I can tell it where to move the pieces, and the computer will move the pieces in response. Pretty cool. I certainly can't beat that, but I'm not a chess person. Let's go to the original Star Trek, the original series. They gave us tablet computers. Watch for them
Captain's
here.
log, stardate 2125.7. Science Officer Spock reporting for Captain Kirk. We've completed 14th orbit of this planet without establishing contact with our missing officers or the parties sent to find them. Subspace communications remain blocked. However, by diverting impulse power to our sensors, we have made them operable. And we have detected one small area on the surface, which seems relatively stable.
It's there, Mr. Spock. Peaceful as Earth, but how do you explain it?
I don't, Mr. Scott. It simply exists. Artificial, perhaps, or a freak of nature. But the fact remains that life can exist in that area.
It could. But it couldn't move around that.
Now, of course, they're writing on their tablets, which we do in ours too, but they can also talk to their computers. And now, so can we. The tablet computer was reintroduced in the Next Generation series of Star Trek, much slicker rendition. Again, this was way before tablet computers became common. They were just kind of experimental at that point. Here's two versions of the tablet computer in Star Trek called the PAD, P-A-D-D, Personal Access Display Device. And it was used to access the LCARS, for you Star Trek fans out there, you all know this, the Library Computer Access Retrieval System. Of course, it wasn't too long before Apple introduced the Newton Message Pad. There's the first tablet computer, really. That really was a smart system. Here, I actually have one. This one is actually, this is the Newton. I love this. This is my Newton Message Pad. This one is actually functional. Yeah. Can I turn on the light? Let's see. There we go. It does no. You plugged in a connector up here. No Wi-Fi. This was before Wi-Fi. That, of course, led to the Palm Pilot. This was first, far more powerful, and but it was a little more expensive. But so, as usual, the cheaper thing wins. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. This technology, 1993, and it took like a few years. It was like 4 years later that the Palm Pilot came out. And finally, of course, we had real tablet computers arrive in 2010. I just want to make a slight side thing here. I'd like to mention how far personal computers have come. This is my first computer, which I soldered together, right? The IMSI 8080 from a kit. You inserted cards into this thing. The cards had the CPU, and it had input output, and it had memory. These are all cards that went into this thing. Here, actually right here too, here is a 4K memory card. 4K, 4,096 bytes. These are the memory chips up here. This card in 1976 cost about $100. Today, in this laptop, I have not 4K of RAM, I have 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's 4 million times this, over 4 million times that. That means that my laptop has about $420 million worth of memory in it, almost $500 million worth of memory right here at this price. Also, by the way, that laptop memory in there, it came on a little card that size. Compare that to the size of this. Now, by the way, that little card with 16 gigabytes of RAM cost less than that. About $90 now. Oh, this guy here, this guy takes about 40 watts of power to power it. And to get 16 gigabytes of RAM, I'd need a cube about 40 feet on a side, packed solid with these, about the size of a 2-story, 3,300 square foot house. And it would take, I have to look here, I forgot the number. It would take about 168 megawatts of power to run the RAM, the same RAM that's in here, about 1/10 of the output of a nuclear power reactor. Science has actually given us science fictional powers in computing. It's amazing. Well, what can we do with it, though? What has science fiction done with it? Well, in reality, we have San Francisco's own Internet Archive. It was founded by a real visionary guy. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to meet him, Brewster Kahle. Brewster wants to provide universal access to all knowledge for free, forever. And you can go on there. And by the way, it was really kind of weird. Their logo, which they had long before they bought this building out in the Richmond district, is strangely like their building. I don't know how they predicted that, but their logo came first. They've been digitizing all human knowledge since 1996. The archive, you want to know what the archive contains now? It contains 588 billion web pages. They archive the entire internet. And they do it every 3 months. 28 million books and texts, 14 million audio recordings, including 220,000 live recordings, a lot of the Grateful Dead, by the way, almost all the Grateful Dead live recordings. 6 million videos, including 2 million television news programs, 3.5 million images, and 580,000 software programs. You can play a lot of the older games on their website, which looks like this. If you've never visited the Internet Archive, I encourage you to do so. It's an amazing resource. It was probably inspired by this series of books, The Foundation by Isaac Asimov. In here, the main character, Harry Seldon, is responsible for compiling all knowledge into the Encyclopedia Galactica. And that's just a part of this amazingly vast story. It's more than 3 books now, too. This was the original 3 books. Of course, we can't leave this whole all knowledge without mentioning, of course, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This started out in 1978 as a BBC radio series, but it was later novelized into a 5-book trilogy by Douglas Adams. Yes, a 5-book trilogy. Here too, we have a compilation of all knowledge in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but the author claims that The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy sells better than the Encyclopedia Galactica, because for 2 main reasons. First, it's slightly cheaper, and second, because it has the words "Don't panic" written in large, friendly letters on the cover. Of course, we can find anything that we need to know using a variety of search engines that we've all come to know and love and hate. We have lots of available search engines to us. And we do have the Encyclopedia Galactica, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, available to us. We happen to call it Wikipedia. Wikipedia has now over 6.3 million articles. It's an amazing resource. By the way, they have a little donation thing going right now. Support Wikipedia. Let's go back to computers, back to Star Trek, of course. Aided by computers, we're back in the transporter room, obviously. They were able to use transporter technology and their computers to synthesize anything they wanted, including food. This was one of the earliest mentions of the food replicators.
Are you hungry? Uh-huh.
What would you like?
Maybe some chicken soup.
So you take the molecules, the energy, turn it into molecules, and according to the arrangement in the computer, you get chicken soup. I hate to mention it, by the way, but the Enterprise went back in time and picked up this guy from the 60s. So, okay. That's why it was so remarkable to him. There's a food replicator on all Star Treks now. Of course, even in the future, communicating with a computer hasn't gotten any easier. As you'll see here, Tom Paris, this is Voyager, comes in and tries to order some food. Computers do what you tell them to.
Tomato soup.
There are 14 varieties of tomato soup available from this replicator, with rice, with vegetables, Bolian style, with pasta, with
Plain.
Specify hot or chilled.
Hot. Hot, plain tomato soup.
Remember, computers do what you tell them to, not what you want them to. Now, what about this food replicator technology? Do we have it yet? Not really, but they're kind of working on it. Here's, it's not like Star Trek. Here's an experimental pizza printer. It's built as a concept for NASA. I've sped this up a little bit, so this is kind of time-lapsey. First, you got to print the doughy crust, fill it with lovely tomato sauce, and finally squirt the cheese on top. It's not the most appetizing pizza. It's definitely not the quality of my favorite, Pasquale's. It's not even the quality of Domino's, so, okay. But that replicator technology, maybe not with food, but maybe with other things, does exist. We have replicator style technology with 3D printers. You only need to design your part as a CAD drawing in the computer. Then you place it in the printer, you position it, you scale it, and then you press the little M button there at the top, and your 3D printer miraculously prints. Now this, by the way, probably took a couple days to print. I printed this little mini shark over here. Let's see, there, it's a little shark. Now it has a little brim on it. You have to break the brim off, but there we go, a little shark. I didn't want to make something that took 3 days to print. And I've actually made a whole bunch of stuff here. Yes, tribbles. For instance, Well, Cale, our technical guy, I don't know where Cale went. He's in here somewhere, but he takes care of all of our audiovisual needs. He printed a beautiful spaceship. That's a science fiction spaceship. Yeah. But I've printed other things too, like you may have heard that we have been orbiting an asteroid called Bennu, and that we took a sample of the asteroid. Here is a 3D print of that asteroid. Or we sent the Rosetta spacecraft to the comet nucleus 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko. Here is what that comet nucleus looks like, kind of a rubber ducky. And this was from data that the spacecraft returned, took altitude data, and we were able to transform that into a model. There's another asteroid. This is the asteroid Eros, kind of an unusual shaped asteroid. By the way, these models aren't solid. They have like a honeycomb structure inside, and then just the outside is solid. What else? Oh, this is SOFIA, the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy. It's a 747 with a telescope, giant hole in the back of the aircraft where a fairly large telescope peeks through. You fly above the water of the atmosphere, and you can see the infrared coming from space. Okay. Oh, let's see, what else do I have? Oh, this is the crater that Curiosity landed in. Curiosity is right there. Craters on the moon. This is all additive. You build it up layer by, oh, let me show you that. You build it up layer by layer. Hot plastic is extruded from the tiny little nozzle you see up there. This tiny little nozzle right there. Oops, that's hard to trace there. So it's like hot toothpaste coming out of a tube that then solidifies. This is the comet nucleus, the Churyumov-Gerasimenko. I just showed you this one right here being made. This is an additive process because you start from nothing and you build it up. There's also subtractive 3D printing, which is you start with a block of wood and then you carve away the stuff you don't want. This is maybe we can turn the light down just a little bit. You can see this better. This is a crater on the moon. If I shine a light sort of obliquely, you can see that this is a kind of a crater on the moon. So this was taken by carving away the stuff I didn't want. This was done on our numerically controlled routing table back in the shop there. Just another way to do 3D printing. One last thing you can do is you can also create metal. I mean, these plastic things are nice, but they're, well, plastic. And you can do metal things too. Here is a metal printer, 3D printer. In this one, you start with powder. You scrape it flat. And the bottom layer, you start and there you go, thin layer, and you weld together the powder with a laser. You then lower it down, squeegee another layer of powder on top of it, keep the process, you build it up, and eventually you can get a 3D model, a 3D metal object. In this case, the element aluminum, which is what it's made out of. Here is an actual printed 3D part. This is done by an artist who you can go online and find her stuff. Her name is Bathsheba, and she makes these just gorgeous mathematical shapes. There is no way you could make this. There's no other way you could make this thing. Come on up after and check it out. It's just a beautiful shape. One more way to make metal is instead of using the powder method is you can spray the powder out of a nozzle and fuse it. And that's what's happening here. This is a giant 3D metal printer that adds layers of metal. And here, the company is called Reality Space 3D. They're printing a fuel tank for their rocket. Again, this is obviously a time-lapse movie, but here the metal is again added from that nozzle. And as it's not added, they weld it instantly into a solid shape. Probably with a plasma torch, would be my guess. But this means you can make shapes of arbitrary, I mean, you can make things that are arbitrarily shaped. It's pretty cool. Okay, let's move on. Oh, I'm already late. to communications, closely related to computing. Well, we all have seen this. This is the before cell phones, before cordless phones. Captain Kirk used this, which looks a lot like one of these, a flip phone, to communicate to the Enterprise. It even had a speakerphone kind of capability.
That was correct, Captain. There it is. Pure titanium.
Fantastic. 20 times as hard as diamond.
21.4 times as hard, to be exact.
Precisely. Scotty, you can mark this vein as confirmed. Inform Starfleet I recommend that they dispatch a survey vessel immediately.
Okay.
Captain.
So in Star Trek Next Generation, that flip phone was transformed into a brooch. We're not quite there yet, but we can. Oh, sorry. That's my ringtone is a communicator. We can use our smartwatches as phones now. So we're getting close to the brooch. Not quite there yet. We'll talk about those smartwatches in a moment, I think. We've come a long way from the flip phone. We carry around with us spectacularly powerful computers that are just masquerading as phones now. They're far more than what science fiction ever predicted. They communicate, they compute, they manage our time, they help us navigate using satellites. They monitor our health, they record our best and worst moments. They act as libraries to music, to video, and, well, to all human knowledge, too. Oh, and we can shop with them, too. And I'm only scratching the surface. Communications devices predicted by Star Trek. What do we see here? In Uhura's ear, a Bluetooth headset. Yes, those have almost disappeared now, but it was predicted by Star Trek. In the 1960s, you could enter the AT&T Pavilion at Disneyland in Orange County. And before you experienced the Circle Vision movie, you could test out the latest in communication technology, the picture phone. Now, the picture phone, this is fairly early. This is in the 60s, so this actually anticipated 2001. Of course, by the way, the picture phone was never really successful because no one really wants to see each other on the other end, right? And our networks weren't really up to the task of doing this. So this was never a success. But we do see a version in 2001. The Bell, notice when he puts the card in, the Bell System logo appears on the screen there. The Bell System did not exist in the year 2001. It never made it to 2001. The Bell System was broken up in 1984, just FYI.
Hello.
And so there we have
How you, Squirt?
the picture phone. Of course, now now the data networks have caught up to the task. We're now gifted with video calls, and for better or for worse, it's allowed us to continue to work from home during the pandemic using all those applications that we have come to love and hate. Again, in computing, Star Trek anticipated something, and that was the universal translator. It helped people who speak different languages, even alien languages in this case, to understand each other. Of course, sometimes they had issues with their technology too. Here's Quark, his brother, and his nephew. They travel back to the 60s, Earth. I love this scene.
Welcome to Earth. We mean you no harm.
Did you understand a word of that?
Our universal translators must be malfunctioning.
What are they doing?
Maybe it's some kind of greeting.
She may be honest. What are they doing?
Maybe their universal translators are broken too.
I love that. Of course, we do have apps, universal translator apps now. I have one that's on my phone, comes with the phone even. You can speak text into it. It can translate it to both written text and it can speak the words. So you can actually communicate with someone who speaks a different language. There are other apps that have uses your camera, so you can translate signs directly into your language. It's amazing. Pretty science fiction.